Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
The crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
Please hang up and try again.
All right, and welcome once again to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. This is, of course, Jason Van Tatenhove, your host, along with Jim White. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing quite well today, my friend. Thank you. It's quite a rainy and dreary day, and there's puddles forming all over the roads. But hey, you know what? We needed it. It's been really outstanding weather. We had a nice run. So let's get settled down for winter.
Definitely more fall-like today in the great state of Montana than it has been for a while. But we do have another guest host on today. We're actually welcoming Tim Brown from the Freedom Outpost. How you doing, Tim?
Hey, guys. How are you?
We're doing good.
Good, man. Good to have you here.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Yeah, good to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Now, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know a lot about you, but I'm sorry, Jim, you were going to do a proper introduction. Let me let you do that. Let me do that.
Really quick, it won't take long. Tim Brown is our co-host, our special co-host today. Tim Brown is an author and editor at freedomoutpost.com and sonsoflibertymedia.com. Husband to his wife, father of 10, jack of all trades, Christian and lover of liberty. He resides in the U.S. occupied great state of South Carolina. Tim Brown, thanks so much for co-hosting with us today on the Liberty Brothers.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. And as you know, Tim, we're going to have Daisy Luther and Melissa Melton are going to be joining us here shortly. So we're going to have a little 5-person roundtable here for the next couple hours, and we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I haven't got to meet either one of the ladies or speak to them. I think Daisy, I've carried both their articles, and Daisy has sent me her book and also contributed as well. And so I just reached out to her the other day and said, man, I'm going to get to be on with you ladies, so I'm kind of excited about that myself.
Yeah, it should be a good show. We've had both Daisy and Melissa on. Actually, Daisy's been on a bunch. She's kind of a stand-in guest host at times, and boy, we just love having both of them on. So it should be great.
Good. Yeah.
So Tim, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. It sounds good.
Yeah, that'll happen a lot, Tim. We may interrupt each other and talk over each other. Don't worry about it. No pressure around here. We'll just, if you talk over me, I'll just stop, and you just go ahead and keep talking. No problem.
I'll do the same.
Is there anything before we have the gals come on, Tim? Is there anything that you want to say as far as background's concerned, or anything about yourself before we go further?
No, I'm not much into self-promotion. I'm just a redneck from South Carolina. I'm surprised anybody reads any of my stuff, and but I hope the Lord uses it in some way to, invigorate the people to recognize, look, these things we put out are not to cause you fear; they're to show you where the enemy is, so you can attack. I mean, in this country, we've been given incredible freedoms, to do the right thing, not to do the wrong thing. A lot of people are trying to take our freedoms and use them as licentiousness to do evil and wicked things. And we've got the power to do what's right. And instead of complaining about it, we have the power to do what is right. As a matter of fact, I've got a call later on this evening. A guy who just called me, who's going to be writing some articles at Sons of Liberty Media on how people can get involved in the court process, and some of that I'm very unfamiliar with. So I'm going to learn something out of that, and I'm kind of happy to have him come on. And but it'll be ways in which people can get involved in that. We've got another guy over there at Sons of Liberty Media that he actually goes around very simply. His organization pulls the records on abortion facilities, finds out where they're not in compliance with the law, and turns them over to the judges. They shut down the abortion clinics, or they find out the abortionists don't have their licenses in order, and they get the license revoked. And it's amazing. And now they've just come out with a book this month called Abortion Free, where they're teaching guys like you and me who have no idea, well, what do we do in this situation? They're teaching you how to do it. You can do it on your own local level.
That's excellent. That is the kind of activism that that I love to see, Tim. I love to see people getting off the couch and tuning out a sports center and actually doing something for their fellow man.
Amen.
You know, and understanding that we're all in this. This is not just about Tim Brown or about Jason or Jim, man. This is this is really, we have to all really stick together, man. Or what do they say? If we don't hang together, we'll certainly hang separately, or something like that. I mean, that's
yeah, something like that.
Right on. So I think we're going to try to get both of these fine young ladies on the phone with us here. Looks like we may have Daisy coming on here. Calling her now. Daisy, are you there?
Hi, how are you guys?
Hey, good, Daisy. Good. Glad to have you. So glad to have you back here on the program.
Sorry about that. 1 second. I
No,
think
that's
I
okay.
have stuff going on in here. Woo! Sorry about that.
That's okay. Let me give you a quick intro here, Daisy. Daisy Luther is a freelance writer and editor who lives in a small village in the Pacific Northwestern area of the United States. She's the author of The Pantry Primer, How to Build a One-Year Food Supply in 3 Months. On her website, The Organic Prepper, Daisy writes about healthy prepping, homesteading adventures, and the pursuit of liberty and food freedom. Daisy is a co-founder of the website Nutritional Anarchy, which focuses on resistance through food self-sufficiency. Daisy's articles are widely republished through all alternative media. You can follow her on Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter. You can email her at daisy@theorganicprepper.ca. Daisy Luther, thanks so much for joining us again on the Liberty Brothers with co-host Tim Brown.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Daisy, nice to hear from you.
Nice to speak with you also.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
we
I
also
appreciate.
have...
I was gonna pitch in that. Really appreciate you sending me the book. Pass it on to my wife, and she's using that in some of our own prepping. And really appreciate all your contributions to Freedom Outpost as well.
Well, thank you. It's one of my favorite websites.
Thank you.
Well, it looks like we have Melissa on the line as well. Are you with us, Melissa?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, Melissa. I hope you're feeling better. I know you weren't feeling well a couple days ago. I hope you're feeling better. Thanks for coming on. Let me give you a proper introduction. Melissa Melton is a co-founder of TrueStreamMedia.com. She's an experienced researcher, graphic artist, and investigative journalist with a passion for liberty and a dedication to truth. Her aim is to expose a new world order for what it is, a prison for the human soul from which we must break free. Melissa Melton, thanks for joining us on the Liberty Brothers.
Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. So where shall we begin? We have just an all-star lineup here. I'll tell you one thing. I'm glad it seems as though that the Ebola thing that's been front and center seems to have died down a little bit, or a little bit on the back burner or something, because it's not on every headline now. What do you think about that?
I think that they're waiting for elections to pull it back out. And that's why we're now down to that lull where they have to talk about Renee Zellweger's facial reconstructive surgery as if that's news, because they're just waiting to pull it back out. That's my guess.
You know, I actually wanted to bring this point up too, because it's kind of been going around some alternative media sources that they're just kind of maybe suppressing some of the things going on that I think it was Alex Jones or InfoWars or something said today earlier that they're actually disappearing people, that there's cases going on across the country, but that they're actually disappearing them. And I was wondering if you guys had heard anything about that. And then I also wanted to ask, Melissa, you had put out a great video on the possibility of Ebola being a hoax, and just all the propaganda that's being pushed forward in the African countries, just trying to present to people that Ebola is real. And I thought maybe we could touch on that a bit.
Well, as far as the disappearing of people, if they were going to do that, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that they would. I wouldn't doubt that this government and their media would do anything at this point. At this point, I feel like we're getting to a place where people are so distrusting, and rightfully so, of what they're being told, that this government could say anything. They could come out and say that it's a blue sunny sky out today and that it's going to be 75 degrees with winds out of the west, and people are like, that's all a conspiracy, weather modification or something, because they've done so much at this point that we're getting to a place where people are splitting off and there's like a group of people who just don't believe anything that we're being told, and then a group of people that believe everything, it seems to me anyway. But as far as the propaganda, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Here, America, we're being told that people are just dropping dead in the streets and that it's pandemonium, that Ebola is just everywhere and it's ravaging everyone. And that it's just these poor, ignorant African people that just don't understand how the disease is transmitted. And so it's just everywhere. But here's the thing. First of all, that is just such a skewed, propagandized view of the people of Africa that it's so utterly wrong that I shouldn't even have to go into that, but it's just very wrong to say that and blanket statements say that these are all ignorant people. They're not. They're putting out all kinds of articles saying they think that this whole thing is a government conspiracy. And that's a line of thought that's happened for basically this whole entire outbreak or whatever it is. But the thing is that what's going on in Liberia right now for sure is there's a whole campaign that's not about how to really stop the transmission. It's about that, but that's not the number one thing they're telling people. The number one message of the campaign is that Ebola is real. So you have now a place where, and here's how far it goes. You have a place where it's not just on a billboard, like here, if someone has a political message or the government has a political message for you, they just slap that on a billboard and you see it when you're driving down the street. No, this is billboards. It's spray painted on buildings. They've got banners hanging across the street. There's a picture in the video I did of Independence Day. It said, "Happy Independence Day, Ebola is real," across the main street in Monrovia. And then it gets even further than that, though. It's not just spray painted on the buildings, on the billboards, all over the place in banners. It's also being bullhorned to these people by people driving down the street periodically. Throughout the day on a timed loop, they will drive down the street and bullhorn Ebola is real. Then there's a song. Actually, there's two songs. There's a song that was funded by UNICEF and other NGOs. Ebola is real. It's this auto-tuned pop song that just so happens to be so popular. It's the number one song in the country, and so they play it all the time. And then they have another version that's the adult contemporary version that was done after a patriotic song called Sweet Liberia for the older crowd. Ebola is real. So they have two songs they play on the radio all the time that's Ebola is real. And then on top of that, they even have it to where if someone calls you and you live in Liberia, when you answer the phone and say hello, the first thing you hear is not the person calling you. The first thing you hear is a public service announcement telling you Ebola is real. Now I ask you, if people are dropping dead all over the streets, as we've been told here, and it's just such an outbreak pandemonium crisis, why are they spending so much money and so much time having people, and they even have teams of people that walk the streets wearing shirts that say it. I mean, this is the thing. Why are they spending that much time to convince everybody that it's real if people are just dropping dead in the streets? The two things don't go together.
Yeah, that's just crazy to me that, I mean, just the phone thing alone. Anytime you connect a phone call, there's a recording. Why are they that dedicated to trying to convince people this is real?
I mean, that's the thing. We live in a country where propaganda has now been legalized since Obama signed the NDAA. I think it was the 2012 one that officially legalized it. Not that they weren't using it against us anyway, they were. And people think of propaganda here, and you think of things like, oh, kind of a twisted slant on a news story or some things like this, right? But this propaganda campaign that is being done against these people in this country is 24/7, just enveloping them in the message that this is a real disease. And to me, that is just, if people are dropping dead in the streets, that should not be the question anymore. You know? There's something about, I'm sorry, that everyone in the country is just so completely ignorant. We're supposed to believe here as Americans, after all. They're just so ignorant. They have no idea what's going on as people are dropping dead everywhere. So they have to continuously be bathed in this message. I'm sorry, but no, I just don't. That doesn't sound right to me. And I think the other issue that people need to look at is some of the other stories that have come out of that country that have been essentially not talked about in our media at all. Things like stories coming out back in August saying they were catching people in various areas all over the country dumping formaldehyde in the water, which causes corrosive internal injuries that can look a lot like the last stages of Ebola. And they were catching people, and there were investigations done on that. And I've read the statements of government officials over there. They were having to investigate that. And we also need to look at all of the things that the government was involved in over there, our government, before this. I mean, we know our biowarfare researchers were over there, and especially those specific hot zone countries, and doing all kinds of testing on these specific viruses, including Ebola and Lassa fever. And also, we need to look at the fact that right before this, the workers in Sierra Leone for the largest diamond mining company in that area were striking for a very long time, and it was a very big deal, and it was disrupting supply. We also know that our military forces wanted to go over there for that whole Boko Haram thing with the girls being kidnapped in Nigeria, which just so happened to happen right after there was all this stuff about new oil being found. Very timely. And now all of a sudden we don't need to, that's all been resolved. It's magically all better now because we're going to go over there and just build camps. You know, like hospitals that just so happen to have barbed wire all around the outside. I don't know. Something here just to me does not wash.
Daisy, do you have any comment on that?
No, I think Melissa covered it really well.
Okay.
To be quite honest. I do think that a lot of stuff is being hidden. I really think that is definitely the case. I found it very strange that these nurses in basically full body condoms ended up contracting Ebola from Duncan, but the family that was there in the Ebola apartment and not allowed to come out, and the apartment wasn't decontaminated for a week, did not. I found that to be really strange. There just seems to be a lot of weird little things that don't add up. However, I do think that there is a disease. I'm not quite as far to the this may be fake side as Melissa is, but I definitely agree with her that there's a lot that just doesn't add up.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think the whole thing is, I'm not saying that I think the whole thing is a hoax. I definitely think there's a disease, and I definitely think there are people getting sick with something, but I just think these people that are in charge of things that are crazy never let a good crisis go to waste. Would they explode something and make it worse than it really is so they could gain some kind of tyrannical control they didn't have before? Yes, absolutely. You know, they've done it before.
I think it would really help if we could talk to someone on the ground there, you know, maybe talk to some of these media outlets out there that are, you know, blaming it on the vaccines or whatnot, and try to get a voice on the ground there that might be able to give us a different perspective.
I agree. I think they're probably being silenced. I wouldn't doubt that they are. I mean, and then on the other hand, you have some of our media there, the New York Times, and they show this guy dropping off his son there, and or somebody who's supposedly his son. And supposedly when you drop someone off at one of these hospitals now, it's basically a death sentence at that point. I mean, that's what we're being told. That's literally what's been being said in our media. And the parents in this video drop this guy off. New York Times video, it's up on YouTube. They drop him off. He doesn't look sick at all, really. And he's on the ground saying, "Oh, I'm gonna die," but like he doesn't really he doesn't have any of the signs visually of Ebola. He doesn't have the rash. He's not bleeding anywhere. He's just does not look sick. And they're not taking any precautions with him, but they're not really acting like they care that he's laying on the ground, really. And then throughout the video, later they come back to him and he's sitting up, moving around, totally looks way better than he looked at the beginning when he's rolling around on the ground. And they go ahead and they take him in finally, and they show the dad just walking away carrying a wad of American cash. What is that? I mean,
I saw that video. That video. Yeah, that was like a payoff. Looked like a payoff. Hey, Tim, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, well, one of the questions I have is over the issue that's come out now with the World Health Organization and saying really that this incubation period, even for the disease, could be 42 days. And now the Obama administration is basically landed on 6 states to, have this screening, if you will, of people who are coming into the United States. I think it's New York and Washington and Georgia, Chicago, and New Jersey. And he's basically put it on them to do the screening rather than have his administration do things that would be tied to what they are supposed to do, and that is people coming into the country. What do you guys make out of that? These guys are going to follow a 21-day tracking procedure rather than follow what the World Health Organization has said of 42 days. What do you guys think about that?
Well, it's even longer when it resides in the testicles of a male, too. It's, 71 days, something like that?
Yeah, 72 days, I think, yep.
When I moved back to the United States from Canada, it was harder to get my cat into the country than it is to come into the country from Liberia with a fever. So,
your
that
cat.
just kind of explains my thoughts on this.
I mean, that's about right. Yeah. That's the thing that Daisy and I have been reporting on this since the beginning. Nothing that our government has done in the response to this has made any sense. Not on the federal level at all. Not even on the local level. None of it. I mean, if you go through basically, it was like a whole statement that was made by the nurses that were treating Duncan at the Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital. If you go through their statement and you listen to the play-by-play of what they did and how they were responding and whenever they brought him back, first of all, they sent him home with antibiotics showing signs of at least the flu. Why would you give antibiotics to someone who has a virus?
Virus is for bacterial.
If you're in 5th grade biology class, you're going to know that doesn't work. So that's just what is that anyway? But then they brought him back and they just put him out in the regular waiting room with everyone else, all the sick people who are obviously probably immune compromised in some way. They're at the hospital in the emergency room and they leave him out there. And finally, a nurse who's in charge, the head nurse, comes in and says, "We need to put this guy in isolation. This could be very bad." And then says that the hospital higher-ups resisted her doing that and fought with her on it. And then it just goes through how they sent his samples basically not properly sealed through the hospital tube system. It's like, why don't you just spray live viruses in the vent? Why don't you just go through the hospital and wipe Ebola-stained sheets on the wall? Like, what are you doing? It doesn't make any sense. Like, if you listen to their statement alone, it's horrifying. It's like a bad horror film.
They ran the tests through the pneumatic system of the hospital. Like, not only are they just going to have it there in that area, they're gonna pipe it everywhere in the hospital.
Oh, but it's not airborne, right? Even I know. I mean, I think at this point, and I mean, I'm not trying to speak for you, Daisy, but I think both of us are just incredulous every day at the new ridiculous fail that is coming out of the response on it. If it's really so deadly as we're led to believe, and they're scaremongering to the hilt, then how could they have failed more in how they've handled this? I mean, just
there's a minimum of like 3 messages a day between the two of us that say, "What? Why?"
I mean, and now they've got the new Ebola Czar, and he's got a wonderful background. Let me just tell you, he was a lobbyist that was helping cover Fannie Mae's butt leading up to the housing bubble. He signed off on Solyndra. He's got wonderful things in his past. Absolutely no healthcare experience whatsoever, by the way. Not an epidemiologist of any kind. Has none of that going on.
The heck out of it. We'll be all better with him.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's really good at distributing money to insiders, though. That's like
there
his
you
forte.
go. So he'll just be able to lie. So that's good. They were like, "Well, do you have a conscience?" "No." "Good, you're in." But the thing is that the video has now come out of him from, I think it was back in 2008.
Yeah, his
showing
big
him,
concern. Yeah.
Yeah, showing him talking about how the biggest concern we have today is overpopulation issues, specifically in Africa and Asia. So this is the guy. It's laughable. It's like, really? That's the guy you picked? What?
Population. There's a czar for that.
Nice. Yeah.
You know, if we could switch gears, well, kind of still in the same sort of the same vein. But I've seen some reports on Amazon where some products, I want to say, maybe it's the suits or masks. I want to say it's up like 1,800%. Or something, the sales on some of these things. Do you think we're finally, and I know we've been getting this way in a long time, this is for any three of you guys, any three of you can answer. Do you think we're finally getting to a point, now I know, Daisy, you were published, I believe, in Mainstream a couple times, but are we getting to the point now where we're not going to be looked at so crazy if we say we're preppers? I mean, the average person now, I would think, realizes that, something, big government, small government, no matter what, I better get some food stored up at least in case something happens. I mean, do you think we've got over that hump and we're sort of reached the tipping point? Or you think we still got a ways to go?
No, I'm pretty sure that they're still going to think that we're crazy. If eventually this is going to blow over unless we all happen to die from it, which I don't really think we will. But when this does blow over, they'll say, oh, we're so silly. I can't believe we went and bought those things. No, I don't believe we're over that, because no one wants to believe that disaster is ever actually going to strike. There's just too much cognitive dissonance for that to happen. I would say I actually have done a lot of mainstream interviews, and I would say it's been about 50-50 positive. Some people are really nice. They don't maybe really understand what we do, but they're nice about it. They're polite. They want to learn. And then the others, they just kind of pick and choose what you say, and they try to make you look a little bit crazy, because I've definitely had some things taken out of context that make me look like a lunatic. The Daily Mail wanted me to take a picture of my daughter and myself. They were going to send a photographer in hazmat gear in a pantry. And I'm like, no, I don't think that we're going to be doing that.
Oh my God.
They really ask us to do that.
That's the thing. I think that what they're going to be doing is no matter what, I don't think ultimately the overall message could ever be positive when it comes to prepping, because I don't think ultimately the government, the powers that be, want people to even take it really that seriously and be prepared. Because I think if something really does go down, they want people to go willingly off to those FEMA camps they built. They spent quite a bit of money on them. I don't think they put them out there not to ever use them.
Yeah, they're probably going to use them for something.
What
Even if they got to find a reason.
Well, Melissa, you were talking earlier about, you were talking about the response of the government on this issue, and I guess I take the approach that, knowing the background of the guy who's in the Oval Office and the ideology that he holds, which is a mixture of all kinds of things, primarily in Marxism, I would say that everything he does is purposeful, and I think we greatly underestimate these guys when a lot of people will say, well, they're just incompetent. I tend to think that there's so much that is purposeful because it comes with the ideology, and we can point to things. I think you've done it too. You've pointed to not only Ebola, but including Ebola, but you made mention of the CDC head saying the things of, we're not going to ban flights because, that might endanger Americans a little more. Well, that's just stupid.
Makes no sense.
My kids forget it. But we see that in everything they do. We see it with gun control, which really ought to be labeled gun confiscation. We see it in the rights to speak out, where the federal government has said if you're going to come out and speak out against Islam, well, then we could fine you and imprison you. We've seen it in free speech in other areas. We've seen it in their violation of the Fourth Amendment in these constitution-free zones. And I think the American people, we're being set up to instigate a revolt. A friend of mine, he's a veteran from Vietnam. He had the only interview that I know of with a guy, Dr. John Drew, who went to college with Obama at Occidental College. And he said they both studied Marxism, they talked about it, and Obama's thought process was, I want to have a communist-style revolution here in America. Well, how do you do that? You've got to provoke the people, and that's what this administration is doing. They're a criminal administration, and they are provoking the people. But you know what? The people of America have been too good and too lenient and too tolerant with these people, and my concern is that we get to a breaking point, and there's going to be a response that people aren't going to like.
Well, there's no doubt that a lot of the policies certainly are harming the U.S. citizens more than anyone. And really, with the CDC thing, I think we need to keep in mind, too, that the CDC really is a corporation and for profit, and they own the patent on Ebola. Therefore, is it really in their best interest to try to stop it or to try to spread it when they're making a royalty check on every time the Ebola is treated? they're making money. So what is their true interest there?
Yeah, I have the question of why you would put a Center for Disease Control in the middle of a metropolitan area. It looks to me like it should be somewhere out in North Dakota or something like that.
Well, that would be logical.
I mean, to answer your point earlier, I would agree with you. I mean, I don't think I'm saying it looks as though everything they've done has been the complete opposite of what you think is competent, rational, logical, common sense things to do. I'm not saying that is actually what they're just bungling. Like we have the Three Stooges in charge. I don't think that. I don't think that at all. I'm saying that at this point.
But there are a lot of people who do.
Yeah, I know, and I do think that is underestimating these people that are in charge. The people that are behind the Obama administration, the people that have been behind whoever the puppet is in charge of our stuff for a long time. I agree with you. I think but there's something they're trying to do here to make, because they're obviously working very hard at this point to make themselves look like complete idiots, to allow whatever's about to happen. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, but I agree with you. I think it definitely underestimates to just say, because nobody, that's the point, it really is that nobody could screw up this bad. Nobody could. You could put my 6-year-old in charge of this thing, and he would not screw it up as bad as this government has,
So do you think they are trying to just poke us with a stick till we do something about it?
I think he would love. I think Obama, the people behind Obama, I think they would love it. I think they would love that. I think that's why you see this, and it's been going on for a long time now, since at least Reagan, where they're giving away, the Pentagon is giving MRAPs away to towns. They gave one to a town in Michigan that had less than 4,000 people. This is a mine-resistant, ambush-protected tank with a gun turret on top, which they're supposed to remove before they put it in America, but whatever. That's straight off the battlefields of Afghanistan. Oops, surplus. We bought too many of those darn tanks. Guess we'll have to give them to our American cities of less than 4,000 people for what?
Oh yeah, well we've had the same thing here in South Carolina. There's a city down below me, and they got one in United Nations color blue. And you're asking the question. This isn't. I mean, you sort of could at least maybe fathom a reason for the police of Los Angeles to need something like that. I kind of get it after some of the incidents they've been in, but I mean, here in what I call Redneckville in South Carolina, you don't need that stuff. You really don't need it.
They're giving them away to universities. They're giving them to colleges.
And
I
agree with you. I don't know
schools.
Exactly. Yeah. What are they? Do they know something that we don't? I don't think so. I think that's going to be used against the people eventually. And while I believe that there's a lot of good police officers, I think there's a lot of them that'll keep their oath and they'll do what they're supposed to do. I think we all know that men will often do things that are immoral and break their code in order to keep their job, feed their families. We're all prone to be tempted in those kinds of ways. And so I think it's just foolish to do those things, to outfit, heavily arm and militarize our police force in such a way and then buy into a thing of, well, we might need this one day. Yeah, but you don't need it now. That's the issue.
Well, and you've got sheriffs going to federal training, and these people are coming out and they're saying things like, America's a war zone. And I know that the NDAA declared us a battlefield. So, but where's the war zone? I mean, if you look at the actual crime statistics that are put out every year by the FBI from the entire, country, crime has been actually going down significantly over the last 20 years. The crime does not match the tank. Let's just put it that way. Towns, that's the one time I agree with the ACLU. Towns do not need tanks. What the hell?
If we can switch gears a little bit here, and I know that this isn't exactly, certainly Daisy and Melissa, not really your area. I know, Tim, you guys cover it sometimes, but I know that, ladies, you can talk about this, I'm sure, intelligently. You see the mayor of Houston want to arrest pastors if they preach against, gay marriage or homosexuality. You have the militant homosexual agenda just seemingly rammed down our throat everywhere we turn. And now you got these people, and now you got these people with this transgender bathroom bill. So a guy walks up to the women's bathroom and all of a sudden decides, today I'm feeling kind of feminine. I guess I can go right into the women's bathroom and utilize it, and there's nothing they can do about it because I'm having a feminine day or a gender day. What in the world is going on with this? It's madness. I can't get it. Can you respond to that? This whole homosexual militant agenda is it's over the top.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. One of you ladies want to take that first, or am I?
Oh, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that whole thing has been. Matter of fact, I'm in the process of writing something that's just come out, and that is that the pastors have sort of struck back. They've taken an offensive measure in that. I'll let you in on that, and I'll leave you hanging until I give the full gamut of that. But what people need to understand, first of all, is what led to that bathroom bill. That's one thing. And it's not just using the bathrooms. I mean, this includes showers and the whole 9 yards of men going in to places that are supposed to be private for women. And growing up, I'm not that old. I'm 45. But when I grew up, you just didn't even think about something like that. It was, it was unheard of that somebody would even. Matter of fact, it was actually almost unheard of that somebody would be openly, a sodomite. It was just unheard of. I think there was one guy in my high school that everybody recognized that he was pretty much, one of those kind of guys. But
did we lose you, Tim?
I think we lost Tim.
Yeah, we'll see if he comes back. It looks like he's still connected.
Mel, Daisy, are you still there? Go ahead. You guys, you can pick it up, Mel.
I mean, I personally, I don't think the government should have the right to tell anybody they can and can't get married. Obviously, if you're hurting a child or something, that's different. But I think separation of church and state, I don't believe that the government should have the right to tell, because I wouldn't want them to tell me what to do on that. And I don't want to judge other people because I don't feel like that's my place in that regard as far as marriage is concerned. However, who are we protecting when we're saying that we have to protect the middle-aged guy who's confused about whether or not he wants male parts or female parts over the 6-year-old girl that uses that same bathroom, who shouldn't have to worry when she goes to school whether or not she's going to be exposed to a grown man or female's, whatever, a grown person's penis. I mean, we shouldn't be showing grown people's penises to 6-year-olds in this country. That's just not something we should do. So who are we protecting? And there is definitely agenda behind this, because if I go out right now to my main street downtown and I have a hetero pride parade, I'm going to wind up on CNN tomorrow as the worst person in the country, and I'm just not politically correct, and I just don't care about people's feelings and rights, and I'm a hate crime, and I'm a hate group, and I mean, that's what will happen. So there's obviously an agenda here, and it's not about everyone's rights. I saw a thing the other day they put out where they said that now classrooms, this was in a middle school in Nebraska, I believe, and they were giving teachers information on how to run their classrooms, and they were saying that it's not gender inclusive to use the phrases boys and use the term boys and girls anymore in the class. That's the G word and the B word. You can't call a girl and a boy anymore, because that's not gender inclusive. You got to think it's something neutral like purple penguins or something. So we're going to teach. But on the other hand, this same government that's running everything has sex education classes going on in kindergartens that are teaching 5-year-olds how to masturbate. So we're going to teach them how to masturbate, but we're not going to tell them if they're a boy or a girl.
Well,
okay?
And we should explain that class, because those are some very graphic images. If you saw the pictures of that sexual education class, it is crazy. It's almost like pornography with clothes on, with a teacher sitting on top of these desks demonstrating how to use, different devices and strap-ons and whatnot, things we can't go into because it's a family-oriented show. But
wasn't there something else to that though? That was like I believe in Canada. Wasn't that wasn't like in a regular classroom? I think. Daisy, don't you know something about that? Wasn't that kind of debunked a little bit? Some of that.
Actually, it was Melissa that wrote that article that debunked it.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Right on. Okay, right. Okay,
that was
that's
not
right.
that was not Common Core, and that was not in America. That was actually in Canada, and that is a woman who owns a sex toy shop up there, and she does do those classes, and she does do them in high schools up there, and that was admitted in several Canadian newspapers, major newspapers. Toronto Star, I think, had a story on her. But I think that particular picture, if I'm not mistaken, and I didn't find this out until later, was from a workshop that happened in a community college campus, but there were people there that were obviously younger than, college age people. However, she is teaching basically free love type stuff in high schools in Canada. And she said that in an interview that she did with a major newspaper up there. So that actually did happen. But the story that was behind the picture that was being floated around here in alternative media sources, I did actually debunk. Because when I saw that picture, I thought that really looks fake. But then I had to look into it further. Because originally the story came that it was happening in French primary schools. And the French people got really mad about it because they were like, no, that's Canada. So then I had to look into her more. But she does. She has a vagina puppet and everything. It's very it's very thorough.
Wow.
I mean, sorry, excuse me, but that's, it's a very thorough class. So she does strap those things on and she does all that stuff. And, I don't, yeah. What has happened to parenting in this country? We've given over so much to the government now. Just realize that, if we're not there yet, we're pretty much going there when we're a society that would rather protect would put the rights of a gender-confused middle-aged man to get completely full-on naked with a full set of breasts and a penis in front of a 6-year-old girl over the rights of the 6-year-old girl not to see that. I mean, that's the question. Where has our society gone? I mean, we have a Department of Justice that is forcing their employees to put out gay rights flags on their desks for Gay Rights Week or whatever it was, month, whatever it was. I mean, why is our government forcing people? I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, that's your lifestyle. I may not agree with you, whatever, but we're supposed to have a constitution in this country. Everyone's supposed to have freedom of speech. We're supposed to have rights in those kinds of regards, right? And so what is it when the government is forcing people to celebrate? I mean, nobody's being forced to celebrate my birthday, for example. It just doesn't, why is that? I feel very, that's not politically correct. Why aren't people celebrating all over the country my birthday? I don't get it.
The bigger question maybe for me is, how does less than 5% of the population, maybe even less than that, how does less than 5% of the population, statistically, maybe 8%, I mean, we're being generous, how do they control? It seems like 100% of the media. I mean, it's such a small, it really is when you break it down, it's a very small group of people that fall in that classification, yet they have such a tremendous influence that it slays me. How do they get away with that?
I think there's definitely an agenda at play, and
yes.
I'm very much along the lines with Melissa. I take a very libertarian view on this, that, I don't, it's not my place to judge anyone. That's up to God, and, if two people want to, that's between them. It's not the government's place to say one way or the other. But I do have issue with, like, this governor or mayor in Dallas that is trying to arrest these preachers for what they are preaching in their own church. If you don't like what's being preached to that church, simply don't go. Don't infringe on their First Amendment rights.
Yeah, isn't that what our country's based on?
Right.
Religious freedom?
Right.
Freedom from persecution?
Right, and it just flies in the face of all of that, and it just, because she obviously has an agenda, she's openly gay, I believe, and again, just leave us alone. That's what I want more than anything from my government.
Yeah, Jim, I'm sorry I got cut off earlier. Is it okay if I jump in there?
Yeah, go right ahead, Tim. Okay.
There are a couple of things here. First of all, I don't think that she's looking to imprison them, at least not off the bat. I think we have to understand how the system works. The citizens, and again, as I was saying, whether the pastors led them in that whole citizens initiative or not is irrelevant, because the pastors don't relinquish their rights when they step in the pulpit. As a matter of fact, if you guys are familiar, I know you are, Jim, our history, the Black Robe Regiment, I mean, they were the firebrand of the American Revolution. They were the ones preaching, this is wrong, this is tyranny, we need to stand up and these kinds of things. And we don't have pastors like that today. We got pastors like Joel Osteen talking about your best Fridays and stuff, forgetting what the Word of God says. And so when these people got together and they started this citizens initiative, they got 3 times. They had to have like 17,200 signatures in order to bring a lawsuit against the mayor and the city council who disregarded the law. That's what they did. This woman disregarded the Texas Constitution in the fact that she brought in her lesbian quote-unquote wife that she had quote-unquote married in California. That was the first violation of the law that they did by electing the woman. I don't know what was going through these people's minds. The second is when they brought this citizens initiative in, was that the city secretary signed off on it saying the signatures are valid. Then they wanted to attack it. The mayor and the city attorney wanted to attack it and say, no, these are not valid, cursive writing, printed writing, and they're making their argument from that. What happened was none of these pastors filed the lawsuit. The lawsuit was filed by citizens. And in a lawsuit, everybody knows that when you file a lawsuit, you open yourself up for what they call discovery. And that includes people who are not even part of the lawsuit, which are these pastors. So according to the way we have things now, it was perfectly valid for them to ask it. Now, the reason they want to ask it, I can tell you, is intimidation. It's exactly what you guys are talking about. It's to intimidate them not to speak out. It's also a way, I think, where they're going to pick and choose once they get sermons and things of that nature to smear these pastors. Well, that's part of the process. Now, Alliance Defending Freedom issued a subpoena to say, no, you guys have went way too far here. You have thrown out a dragnet, which any good lawyer, if you have a lawyer, you want him to get as much information as you can, and that's afforded the other side as well. However, the mayor stepped back on that because the pastors wrote up and says, to heck with you people. This is none of your business. Texas state constitution, this is a Texas issue. It is not a federal issue. The Supreme Court, the federal courts have no business in this at all. It is a state issue. And what happened was, I've just gotten word that many of these pastors thought, you know what? It's probably a good thing because of what our message is. We're just going to go down there and we're going to dump out sermons and Bibles in the mayor's office, and that's what they've done. They've took the offensive line in that. And that's, in my opinion, that's where we're going to have to win the war. We cannot keep fighting leftist, communist, socialist, Islamist, the sodomite community and such. We cannot keep fighting them from the defensive. We've got to have an offensive. And for most of us, that's a new thing because we're people that just want to be left the heck alone. We're not good politicians. We're not good attorneys. We're just people that just want to live our lives, and we don't want to have that kind of stuff imposed upon us. But we're going to have to learn how to fight back. And it looks like these pastors have said, we've had enough. We're going to just dump it off on you. And from my view, I hope there's enough within their sermons and such that it has something that to convert the lesbian mayor there and really change her heart, which will change her actions.
Well, I guess we'll see on that one. I don't know. Go ahead.
I just was going to say something too about this, going back to how they're trying to put this thing in schools where you can't call a boy and a girl, which will just really confuse the hell out of children. But anyway, even the people in the comments on that story, which it was on several outlets, but the one I read happened to be on Fox News, of course. The people that were going in there commenting, they were saying, I'm gay and I think this is ridiculous, or I'm transgendered and I wouldn't even go here. This agenda has not, I don't think that a lot of the people that are in that community agree with this agenda here, but it's a lot like what you saw with the women's rights movement. And you need to look at who's behind all of these big social movements, because women's rights, what was that about? That was a Rockefeller initiative to break up the family unit, essentially, so they could tax both parents and have both parents working and destroy the family so they could more easily control the children.
Yes.
And they've been pushing depopulation since the very beginning for decades and decades and decades. And that's what they equate women's rights to, is birth control and sexual liberation. And marriage rates have gone way down. I saw a Pew report now. People are just not even getting married in this country anymore. The numbers have gone very far down. Divorce rates have gone at the same time very, very much up. So you have that going on. And, the family unit is being systematically destroyed for a reason. The Obama administration is talking about making school days longer, taking away summer break, instituting a pre-K program that would also be longer. So you'd have these children basically be taken away from the parents at a very young age and be in school all day long into the night, having 3 meals a day at school and eating all that crap food and being indoctrinated into this education system and being away from their parents. That there's a whole reason for that. We're witnessing now history repeating itself. This is a lot like what was going on in the communist days. With Lenin and Stalin and all that kind of stuff. This is the kind of stuff that's going on here now, and they've got this new agenda that they're pushing, but it's the same old tune they're playing as they were playing with the big feminist movement. That if you Google Rockefeller and women's studies, you'll get like 500 million, search results. That's what's going on. There's an ultimate agenda behind that. It has nothing to do with someone's rights, at all. These people that are behind this want everyone equally dead. They don't care if you're gay. They don't care if you're female. They don't care what your religion are. They want most of everyone dead. That's what they want.
Well, it really is a page out of The Naked Communists. You look at these plans that the communists have put together so many years ago. They've really completed the vast majority of it.
Oh yeah, the planks and everything.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Exactly.
Yeah, there's no question. It's not only the communist manifesto that's at stake here. We have behind that also, because we saw it in Germany. We had the Islamists who came in hand with the socialists, and right in the middle of the communist manifesto is the propagation of homosexuality as normal. And Jim, you and I were talking about that earlier. There's nothing normal about that. People want to talk about it and they want to use the terms gay. I like the terms, that we used to use. One, obviously a biblical term was sodomite, but queer or homosexual. You call it for what it is, because.
Don't mean to interrupt you. Let's come back to this at the other end of the hour. We've got the hard break coming up. Stick with us, folks. You're listening to the Liberty Brothers radio show here on Revolution Radio. Be back on the other side of the hour. All right, and welcome once again to the Liberty Brothers radio show. And as always, on hour 2, we very much like to encourage our listeners to do their part to help support the station. I just gotta say that we have so many listeners here at Revolution Radio, and it really does take a lot to keep these servers online to handle the millions of listeners that plug into Revolution Radio every day. And we need your help to keep those lights on, to keep the radio show going, because really, we don't have memberships for freedomslips.com. There's no ads that you hear on the radio for the radio station itself. So please do your part. You can click on the donate button at freedomslips.com, and any little bit helps. If you can't do it, we totally understand. But if you can, please vote with your wallet and help keeping this information going. A few other things we wanted to talk about real quick. It really became a faux pas after the tea party of our revolution to drink tea. And that's really when coffee became the American tradition. And we actually believe in that tradition at Liberty Brothers, and we would encourage you to go to libertybrothers.com, and you can click on, there's a Ben Franklin banner, drinking coffee, and go check out our coffee link. You can get some great coffee there, help support the show, and it all goes to supporting the Liberty Brothers. So there you go. We also have, there's also a quick banner up there. There's a chance for you to win, I want to say it's a 67 Mustang that's all tricked out. It's got a custom paint job. There's only, I want to say 500 tickets being sold. But there's also, you click on the link from thelibertybrothers.com to the Mustang site, and very good odds, much better than the lottery to win that. And it goes towards a good cause that helps support Stand Up America. And so do your part. All right, well, we're back to the show now, and of course we have a roundtable going on with some great guests here. We've got Tim Brown of freedomoutpost.com, we have Daisy Luther of the Organic Prepper, and we have Melissa Melton of Truth Stream Media, so just a star-studded roundtable here. And, I thought I would kick it off real quick, and we'll move into some of the other topics. We can talk about what we want, but I've been thinking about this lately. I was going to start writing an article on it about how much further along we are than 1984 or Brave New World. It seems like the doublespeak that's happening these days in mainstream media and with the government, we touched on it earlier that, whatever they say, we just can't believe. How much further down the road do you think we are, guys, than, say, like 1984?
I think that they are hiding all kinds of technology from us. That from all the research I've been doing lately, which admittedly a lot of it's in the alternative energy side. But I think that people say they think that whatever the government has is probably 30 years ahead. No, I'm going to go ahead and say it's at least a century, that they've been hiding just basic technology from us. And they've got us all set up on this system of planned obsolescence where everything breaks down much earlier than necessary, and basically have us trapped in some weird consumerist system of buying a bunch of crap. You fulfill your job all day and then you die. I mean, we're definitely past 1984. And then, of course, all the police state stuff and everything else. I mean, I see a time coming where it's like THX 1138 and our medicine cabinet tells us to take our medicine. I think that's probably coming up much sooner than people realize, because pretty soon we're going to start talking to our thermostats. I mean, it's insane what we're living in right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of a technophobe. I'm not crazy about most of these so-called advances. There's too much hidden in every new generation of technology. There are little trap doors and there's all sorts of stuff. I don't like it at all.
They've got us spying on ourselves. It's like surveillance. That's what they call it when you spy on yourself.
Yeah, I finally got a cell phone. Weeks ago, I finally got one, and I'm really not caring for that at all.
You know what I wanted to do, and I meant to do it earlier, but we came back from the break and we talked about our websites, and I know we mentioned your website, but if you could just each briefly for maybe 30, 45 seconds, and start with you with the ladies. Daisy, you can go first. Tell a little bit about your website and what you do, Daisy on the Organic Prepper, and then Melissa, if you don't mind, and then Tim, please.
My website's a preparedness website with more of a health kind of basis. It's called theorganicprepper.ca, and there's all sorts of information on there. There's lots of preparedness advice, lots of health advice, and a little bit of political stuff thrown in just for good measure.
My website is truthstreammedia.com, and we basically try to expose the corruption and the larger globalist agenda that's behind basically everything we're being told today through our establishment media and through our government, because a lot of it doesn't make sense. And when people turn on the news and try to make sense of it, none of it's put into any kind of context. And so we try to put things in a historical context, show what's been done before, how history is repeating itself, and what the larger goals are with this tyrannical system that we're seeing being put in place right now. And then we do a lot of video reports up at youtube.com/truthstreammedia. We have a show that we're trying to get going, but every time we do an episode lately, it ends up being much longer than just the hour that we had envisioned. So we have a new episode coming up pretty soon. We're almost finished with, and that'll be up at youtube.com/truthstreammedia.
I'm the potluck site. We carry all both Melissa's stuff and Daisy's stuff, and news and politics, commentary, and we don't mind going into the area of calling people back to a standard, which is God's Word, because I think it has answers for all of these issues that we talk about as we talked about before.
All right. And, of course, the LibertyBrothers.com, if you haven't checked it out, it has most of our better interviews. We try to make videos of pretty much all the ones that we think are people will want to listen again, and check that out as well. So, all right, guys. Well, why don't we move on a little bit to what's happening on the border? And it just seems that we're at a point in time right now that we're just being hit with just one thing after another. Obviously, we've got this started back this summer with all these illegals coming across. They're being shipped into the country. You know, we're seeing a rampant rise of these mystery illnesses, these respiratory illnesses, which are actually starting to kill our children now. Is this a political agenda to create a voting bloc, or to try to destroy the welfare system with a Cloward Piven type strategy? What do you guys think's happening with the border there?
Does anyone want to take? I will say this. I think what's creepier about the border isn't just the fact that you have all these people coming over. They try to make it sound like it's all women and children, but as we know, you've got gang members coming over here. You got all kinds of stuff. But Oath Keepers actually did a story, I want to say it was probably a month ago. I was trying to find it real quick, but they did a story about how you've got these ranchers. They interviewed one of these ranchers that lives right on the border, and he was talking about how he's in contact with Border Patrol, and they're bringing over, there's actually people coming over here that are on our terror watch list, our terror warning list, whatever, and they're whisking those people away. DHS is coming in, they're taking these people, and they're just whisking them off somewhere, and they're removing all the records from the system that they ever showed up here. That's the kind of stuff that happened pre 9/11 that is sending off huge red flags. I think also when you have warnings coming out that ISIS is operating out of Juarez, which is in Mexico right across the border from El Paso, and they're not doing anything about that, but we have to go to Syria and airstrike all of their grain silos and all of their oil refineries, right? I mean, what is going on there? Americans have been fed a huge lie that they would have security in exchange for their liberty. They've given up all kinds of freedom. You can't even go to the airport now without your grandma having her colostomy bag ripped out just so you can go to Disneyland or whatever. Have your 3-year-old felt up in a wheelchair for bombs or something, right? But so at that time, I can't go to the airport. I have to take off my flip-flops. And yet, obviously, we've got ISIS members supposedly just hanging out right across the border. People are coming in on the terror watch list. You would think DHS would want to advertise that they caught some terrorists, right? That their system of protecting us all from this dubious war on terror is finally working, but they're not. They're whisking these people away secretly. What's up with that?
I think it's even more sinister than that. I'm with you guys in the fact that, we see this stuff in Syria and this, that, and the other. And as far as I'm concerned, we ought to follow our Founding Fathers' admonition to keep our nose in our own business. And if we were cleaning up our own backyard, like what Melissa's pointing out there on our own border, if we were dealing with that, which is enough to keep us busy, we wouldn't be worried about what's going on in Syria and stuff. Of course, as the ladies have said, I think there's other ulterior motives there.
Absolutely.
While we're putting our nose in over there in the Middle East anyway. We've been doing it for decades. And I do think, although I think, Ron Paul is naive on Islam, I do think he's exactly right on the foreign policy of how we're dealing with things. And so you're wondering, why is the DHS doing these kinds of things? Look to who's leading it. I mean, Janet Napolitano was... as far as I'm concerned, I'd say she's the puppet. She's the figurehead. It was the people who are behind her. We've got this guy who recently he resigned, or he was fired, or whatever the case was, Mohammed El-Berry. He was an Islamic imam. He leaves, a week after ISIS says they're coming across the border in Texas? And where does he go? Texas. That's where he goes. And I had a lot of people who made comments of, is he going down there to facilitate these guys coming across the border? And My question was, were the Texans who are not out in front of his little think tank down there protesting him over this? We're talking. We talked earlier about bathroom bills and homosexual special rights and stuff like this. My question is, boy, isn't there bigger fish to fry than those kinds of things? If you have potential threats, I would side with what was said a moment ago. Why is Homeland Security not stepping forward and saying, hey, you know what, we've actually stopped this, and here are the people we've stopped? Instead, we get the reports of these gang members, these alleged terrorists, and all of that being swept away, and almost a denial by the Department of Homeland Security, which, frankly, I think is unconstitutional. It ought to be done away with a whole lot of other federal departments. Because they're not securing us. Let the people keep their weapons and let us defend ourselves.
Well, I can't argue with that. Something I've observed, and I'm not the first one to point this out, and I'd like to get to know what all three of you think about this. Whenever there's a major event, whether it be Boston bombing, Sandy Hook, when it seems to me that when they're really suspicious or even could be considered staged events, the media is like right there, ready to go. But when something happens that they're not ready for, man, it seems like it just throws everything all out of whack. I mean, do you guys see that also? That it seems like they've got the media at the ready when some of these events happen because they want to spring on it. That to me is a sign that it's staged. What do you think about that?
True. I think that's absolutely true. And one of the things that proved that to me is when Sandy Hook went down. And that was, they had all that stuff going on with Sandy Hook, and that green screen with Anderson Cooper was supposedly there, but his nose was getting cut off by the green screen. All that stuff. They went so overboard with Sandy Hook. They had the children singing the song and all that stuff, right? At that same time, right after that, I believe it was in January, a 15-year-old took an AR-15, a homeschooled 15-year-old even, took an AR-15, and I think it was in New Mexico, I want to say, or Arizona, and shot his entire family and then got in the car and was going to Walmart because he was going to open fire on people in Walmart. Now, you would think, right, that after Sandy Hook having happened, that the media would jump all over that as just further proof that we need some gun control and, with the added boost of totally demonizing homeschool kids. And yet, you didn't hear that story, I bet. I bet none of you probably did. I only randomly came across it and then reported on it. I worked at InfoWars at the time, and I reported on it just because the glaring absence of any media coverage, really, was one story about it, and then it was gone. And you would have thought there'd be a helicopter flying over that kid's house, this is where he lived, and here was his, all of that, right? They didn't do any of that stuff. So it's only when they want to push an agenda and when something has been staged, you have to say, when they're on something so fast and they're pushing it in everyone's face 24 hours a day, there's a reason, and it's not to give you the news.
If I can go back to the border situation for a moment. Here's my biggest concern with that. A couple of weeks ago, I guess it was 3 weeks ago, there were a lot of threats out on the internet. There were some in Australia and some in Canada and some in the United States. And the Islamic State was threatening American soldiers and Canadian soldiers and Australian soldiers, and saying that they were going to take the attacks to their own soil, that we needed to be alert for terror attacks. Well, look what just happened in Canada. Of course, we don't know that this was an Islamic State terror attack, and I'm not saying that it was. But if our southern border is open, this makes all of our soldiers that are down near that border, this makes them vulnerable to attack, because these people can easily just waltz right across the border because thousands of people are doing it every single day. So I think that that's another thing that we have to look at is these domestic attacks.
Agreed, and I think they would...
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead,
I was just going to say that, look at what our government, did with 9/11. So I think they would love to just have that at their disposal to push that button at any time, because there's no mistake here that ISIS was funded, trained, and armed by our government and by other Western governments working in consort with our government. That is on record. Yep. It's been on record, and it can't be ignored. I mean, just the other day I wrote an article about how they accidentally airdropped weapons into the ISIS territory in Syria. Give me a freaking break. I mean, this is a government that, thanks to Edward Snowden, we now know they can capture the data of whole countries at one time, disaggregate it with an algorithm, and know who made what phone call to who. If they have that kind of capability, but they accidentally didn't know that was ISIS territory in Syria, oops, we gave a whole airdrop of weapons to the wrong group. We'll have to look into that. Are you kidding me? And we're supposed to trust these people? People like McCain saying we're vetting these rebels that we're giving $500 million a pop to and all these weapons. They're vetted. Well, what's that vetting process? None of the American people have been allowed to see that process. You have McCain in that picture standing there with members of, 2 of those guys have been found to be kidnappers. That's a picture of him with like 5 other people. So he's already got a 40% vetting fail rate in that picture. So now you think about the whole group of these people that they're vetting. Give me a break. I don't believe anything this government says about who the terrorists are. The Free Syrian Army doesn't even exist. That's not even a thing. That's something that our government has made up. I even found a picture on Voice of America, which is our government's propaganda arm, of supposedly the rebels, the Syrian rebels, cleaning their weapons. And they're sitting in front of a wall that's been spray painted with some graffiti in their language, but then in English it says "live free or die," or "we'll die fight," or some kind of thing like that in English. Now you tell me, why would the Syrian rebels decide to spray paint their mission statement in English? What? I mean, come on. I don't buy it. I'm sorry. It's just too many times on record, our government has funded and created boogeymen to serve their own purpose. And the purpose right now is to remap and take control of the Middle East in small, tiny sections. They want control of that whole area that the rimland that surrounds Russia, and they're going to do it. And right now they're talking about breaking Iraq into 3 different states. They've wanted to go into Syria ever since last year. Remember the red line, Bashar al-Assad, we have to go in, whatever. Now they found another way to do it, because nobody wanted them to do that last year, and everybody poured out, they cried out against it. But now they've scared everybody with ISIS. I mean, ISIS, man, I hear people talking about ISIS when I go to the gas station now, okay? It scares ISIS and Ebola. Everyone's afraid of one or the other or both. And so they've created another way to repackage the same mission, and they're doing it now because they went over there and they're destroying grain silos and oil refineries. Okay. That's what they would have done last year if everyone hadn't, protested. There's a plan here, and it involves the governments of these countries want to take control of that area. It's on record. It's funny
you mentioned ISIS and Ebola. A quick point. Do you remember that one point where they said that members of ISIS were going to be infected with Ebola and come across the border? So they combined them both together. They put all the fear into one guy.
And people believed it. They believed it. I mean, our government approves drugs through the FDA that on record kill 100,000 Americans every year who overdose. That's a whole nother group of people getting killed. I'm talking about people that just take their prescription medication as it says on the label. 100,000 people dying every single year. That's our government doing that. But people are freaking out because one guy died of Ebola because you know what I'm saying? How many ISIS members have come here and killed anybody yet? They're going to wait and pull that out. I'm sure it's in their bag of tricks with all their other crap. But yeah, ISIS members infecting themselves with Ebola. Wow, that's just like a magical fairy tale of crap that our government makes up. It's just so ridiculous. But people believe it. That's the worst thing, is that people believe it, and then they allow that fear to control their whole lives. It's very sad. If we keep getting wrapped up in one scandal after another, no one's ever going to take control of their own life and realize that their freedom, their liberty, the Constitution is being sucked away.
Well, that's part of the reason that I talk about, a lot about being armed. I know, Daisy, you had an article about the Second Amendment today.
Yes.
But the whole idea of being armed, and I went to a Tea Party. I was asked to speak to a Tea Party rally, the first of last year, 2013, and I just recounted the history of our War of Independence. And it wasn't, most people think, well, it was about taxes. Well, my goodness, I mean, we had like a 2 or 3% tax at that time. Now, what is it? What is it pushing? 35% or more in some income categories. But the thing that really brought it about, they had been pushing arms bans. They had been pushing, for registration of guns. And finally the British came over, and that was the whole cry of Paul Revere, was the British are coming. Why? Because they were coming to take the cannons, the black powder, the muskets, everything that was left, and the people went in and got it out from under them. And when the Second Amendment not only starts out and it talks about the militia is essential for a free state, but then it distinguishes from the militia and the people, and it says the rights of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There's not anything to figure out there. There is no authority at all for the federal government to write any kind of legislation restricting any kind of arms. Now, I'm considered extreme in that, but whatever is an arm, if it's a tank, if it's a fighter, and some people worry about that, and I'm like, well, who has money to buy all that stuff in the first place? So it's not like I'm concerned about the guy across the street from me getting one of those.
Yeah, but who wants the government to have all of them?
Well, that's exactly the point. That's exactly my point, is to leave it over to the people. And even in the States, I spoke to the sheriff. He came up and they were talking about CWPs and stuff. And I said, well, if it is a right, if it is an unalienable right, that means you can't give it up and the government can't take it from you. If that's what you're talking about, Declaration of Independence kind of rights, if that's what you're talking about, what business does the state telling me I got to jump through all these hoops in order to go buy a gun? And if I do that, I can defend I'm not worried about ISIS. I'm not worried about them now, even under all the regulations. We're going to have Brian Kolfage on, the single most serious wounded airman of U.S. history. He lost 3 limbs in Afghanistan fighting these guys. And when I asked him about that threat to our military guys, he said, I'm not worried about it. I don't think they are either. He says, our vets, he said, and our military people train themselves at home. They train their wives, and many of them train their children. He says, fine, they want to come stick their face in our door. It's just an easy target for us to take them out. So I think the same thing here. If you have, I can tell you go into local Walmart or wherever down here, I can tell you more than half the people are carrying. And before a guy would get out, Allah Akbar, he'd have several beads drawn on him and probably be dead. So I don't worry about that either. I realize there's a potential real threat, but like you, I see it as, here's our government who's been spying on the American people. They have this technology, and yet they say, well, there's all this chatter. Well, you guys got the ability to go track these phones. Why don't you go get the guys chatting? It don't make any sense to me.
That because they didn't set this particular guy up. It's only the ones they were able to catch.
Right.
That's true.
But still,
the FBI
that's
is involved in all terror plots in this country. That's really true.
Yeah, I don't doubt it at all.
All right, guys, let's switch gears here a little bit. We talk about all these different possible crises and whatnot, and kind of weigh whether or not it's something we really should take seriously. And I think we are all preppers to some maybe more of a degree than others. I know my family and I are definitely, I would put us in the prepping category. Can you talk a little bit about the different things that you are actually concerned about that you have prepped for, and I kind of have to be in the category that I kind of prep for everything, just in case, whether it's being up here in Montana, a hard winter storm and trying to get my wife to the doctors during that, where we've got to make an 8-hour trip, to just having the power knocked out from a Montana storm. But, I'm definitely have shored up things for the Ebola scare, just in case. Can you talk a little bit about the things that you actually are actively prepping for, and what concerns you the most, I guess, that's on the radar? Maybe we'll start with Daisy.
Well, we try to be generally prepared in our household so that it's really a very small flurry of activity for a wide variety of different circumstances. So I did add a few supplies for the potential of an Ebola pandemic. I added some protective clothing that I really hadn't considered needing to purchase before. I never thought about the need for Tychem impermeable clothing before this. So I did add a little bit of stuff like that, but I didn't have to go get a whole bunch of stuff because we have a food stockpile and a water stockpile and all of our basic supplies. We can meet our own needs for quite some time. So for us, it's just a matter of staying supplied, raising food, doing things like that. Really, it's not that survivalist bunker mentality.
I thought you lived in a bunker.
No. Though, I'll tell you, the guy from CNBC did ask me if we had a bunker. And I said, no, we live in a little Victorian house.
I mean, anybody who saw how the government handled Hurricane Sandy, after all of the money that's been poured into FEMA and Homeland Security and all these things that are supposed to protect everyone, all the drills and trainings they do. Look at how horribly awful, even after Hurricane Katrina had happened and they saw that whole thing, look at how, just on the surface, if you still believe in your government's ability to do anything, look at how badly they botched the handling of that and how people were starving and cold. And I mean, these people are not going to protect you if something happens. And that's anything from a natural disaster to basically the power going out because we have an aging power grid, or any of these attacks they keep telling us are going to happen, or Ebola, or anything. The government is not going to protect you. The best thing the government might do, and this is not best, I say best with derisive air quotes best, is come to your house, pull you out, and usher you and your family off to one of those wonderful FEMA camps, which I live near one, so that absolutely do exist. So, I mean, who wants to go there? Who wants to go to a FEMA camp? Raise your hand. Nobody. So get some food. Be self-sufficient. That's the biggest thing. And I think what we've tried to do here and what we've been doing a lot of is growing our own food, because the food that we have in this country, a lot of it's genetically modified. A lot of it's filled with petrochemicals. We've got 2% of the population growing all of the food for the other 98%. It's not a very sustainable situation. I know that word's been hijacked, but just on, by its own definition, this is not a sustainable situation for every single person in this country to be super reliant on a very small amount of people to grow all of the food. And you can see that with the droughts in California that are going on, manufactured or not. And so being more reliant, having a can of heirloom seeds under your bed is great, but you have to ask yourself, if an emergency happens, are you going to have the skills to actually put those seeds in the ground and make them turn into food? Because that has been a learning process that we're still, we learn every single day with that. And we've been doing it now for over a year, trying to grow our own. And we finally gotten to the point where we're harvesting things from our backyard and preparing them in our kitchen. But it took a lot of trial and error. So you have to think about that when you're trying to stock up and have some of these survival skills, really living those things now so that you have those actual skills so that you don't have to suddenly have a huge learning curve if something should happen and you need that.
It's really interesting that you mentioned skills. I interviewed yesterday Max Velocity from the Tactical Training School, and one of the things he mentioned is that all of these people read these tactical manuals and they surf the net, and they think that they have all of these skills, but actually they don't have the skills at all. And when they come to his training school, which they go and they stay for a week and they run around the woods and they do real tactical training like Army style, they find out exactly how much they don't know. And, I've had that humbling experience several times myself through my preparedness journey. You don't realize that you have no idea how to do something until you actually must do it. When we lived up in northern Ontario, where it gets to negative 46 degrees with 4 feet of snow, my daughter and I spent a year up there. We had a really inexpensive cabin out in the boondocks. It took me a month to light a fire that would stay lit all night in my wood stove.
Wow.
And I was absolutely convinced that we were either going to move or die because I couldn't keep that fire lit because the wind would start going down the chimney and it would take it out. And, before that, I really hadn't. I had lit a couple of campfires, in nice, dry, hot summer weather, but I had never tried to get a wood stove going and heat my entire house with it. And I'll tell you, that was the most humbling experience of my entire life. I didn't know if we were going to be able to stick it out. I seriously did not, because that was our only source of heat. But the thing I learned from that is how clueless most of us are that feel like we're prepared. We think all of these things are great ideas, but unless you actually practice them and drill them and grow your food and can your food and do all that, you have no idea if you actually know that stuff or not.
How about you, Tim?
That's true. Our family, I'll just tell you straight up, I have a black thumb. So whatever I plant, it doesn't turn out too good. But we've got several of the garden boxes, which I actually was able to grow some stuff in. But my father, he lives about 100 yards from us, and he, grew up in a time where he learned all the gardening. He grew up on it. And as a kid, I despised it. I despised going out there and picking up potatoes and all the stuff that went along with it and pulling weeds. But my wife has really gotten into, a lot of healthy eating and stuff, which helps our family because I'm sitting at a desk all day, and so I need something, that's good for me. So she does a lot of the research on that, and she helps our girls. We've got 6 girls and 4 boys. She helps the girls to understand, all of those kinds of things and how to prepare them and stuff like that. And they do some of the meals and stuff like that. So they get sort of an early start that a lot of young people probably aren't getting, instead of being hooked on a lot of the junk food and stuff like you guys were mentioning before. The other thing is she does, I've had her put back some things like wheat berries. She goes to a local co-op and she'll get like 50-pound wheat berries and put those back, and then of course they'll keep for forever pretty much. And you got a wheat grinder, and you do that, and basically you got probably enough protein in the bread that you make. You don't even have to stick any meat on it. It's a pretty dense bread that's made. Another thing that I'm looking at doing is I'm working with my brother-in-law about some solar or wind kind of stuff, not because, again, sustainable stuff, but just for efficiency. Changing a well pump out from an 220 AC to a 120 DC and running it off of there. I mean, you have just not lived until you've had the power go out, and there's 12 people in your house, many of which are small children who pee every 5 minutes, and you can't flush the toilet. And you have to go down to the creek, which is, 400 or 500 yards away from the house, and haul it up in 5-gallon buckets. You just haven't lived until you've done some of that stuff. So I'm telling you that those are some simple things. And from my perspective, any of those solar kind of generators where you can run like a refrigerator or a freezer are good things to have, because I figure if you do that and then you got running water, at least the majority of your issues that you're used to are kind of covered. You may not have hot water for it, but you got running water, and that's a good thing. And some of the other skills you were talking about before, we got a book years ago that taught all kinds of stuff. It was ridiculous, teaching how to make wagon wheels and how to thatch a roof, and stuff like that. Just things that we just take for granted today because we got shingles and we got rubber tires. But what happens when you get into a situation that may require that you're having to actually, kind of crank that stuff out? It's kind of good to have that information. And of course, I got one of my boys my oldest is very musically inclined, but my second boy, he's more outdoorsy and he loves to get into that stuff. And so he'll go out there and practice on some of those things. I'm like, if each one of the kids can learn different skills and you can utilize it, that's a benefit to the family as a whole, which leads me to kind of push that I'm working with a guy who developed the Joshua Mark V semi-automatic rifle. And his whole concept, he's up here in the mountains of North Carolina, his whole concept is not individual prepping, but it's community prepping. Because we can only do so much ourselves. And so this guy has a whole network of people, and they're doing, spirulina, and they're doing earthworm. I mean, they get, they just spread it out to where everybody's doing something in the community. And that way, if, things tank and stuff, you're not just dependent upon yourself. You've got other people that you're relying on. I think that's going to be key, if we ever face any really hard times here in the United States, is to be dependent upon one another, where we can kind of work together instead of just being our own independent, little bunker, if you will.
Well, yeah, and look at what's happening with the way that things are being engineered in this country. They are pushing people into the cities big time. It's part of a huge campaign. The Rockefellers are behind it, but it has to do with doubling the amount of people living in these mega concentrated large metropolitan centers, America 2050 plan, and they're emptying out the rural areas. They're making it harder and harder for people to live there, to find work there, to have a meaningful existence there. And if you think about, like the power going out, even on, a couple of states or something, if the power were to go out, these large areas, I mean, you guys know, you've interviewed James Wesley Rawls, they will be unlivable within days. There will be no food and things going into there, and the sanitation issues, like you said, with carrying buckets of waste and everything. I mean, those places will not be habitable. So everyone needs to think about that as well. And
even the power grid is so fragile. It's much more fragile than we think it is. That's one of the things we talked with James Wesley Rawls on the other day. And
right.
It's amazing how easily different parts of there are some decent areas with hydroelectric and whatnot, but a lot of these nuclear plants, if things go bad, people stop showing up for work or whatnot, just from a psychological scare from this Ebola thing. Those things are going to shut down.
Yeah, well, didn't they say there were only 9? There's 9 substations in this country that if one were attacked, it would take the whole thing offline. Yeah. 9 or something, some little ridiculous small number like that. And really what you're actually seeing on a major scale behind all of this is they want this power grid to fail because they want to put in a new grid. And a lot of the people who are experts that talk about this kind of stuff, they talk about how they want to put in this new smart grid, the wonderful smart grid that they want us all to be living on when we're all living in these, mega centers, where you have smart meters on your house that send out signals every 5 seconds from every appliance in your house, and they can use an algorithm to see how much electricity you use when you take a hot shower or dry your laundry, and then use it to institute peak pricing and control everyone. But basically what they're doing with that is they're trying to basically, it's like Detroit, like they want to let it fail so they can do something else with it. They want to put in this grid. CFR has already put out reports recently on how this is going to be a big talking point for the 2016 presidential candidates, because they want to do an NAU power grid. They want to connect our power grid to Mexico, and they want to have a whole smart grid overlay thing, but they can't just build it all on the existing infrastructure because, like you said, it's very frail and weak, and so that's what they ultimately want. So we're going to have to see how that plays out.
So very important to make sure your preps all work without electricity, folks.
Yes.
Just don't trust the government.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
One thing I'd like to add regarding electricity. A lot of people prep in a way that they intend to have backup electricity, and that's not always practical, especially for people on a budget. When we lived, let me just refer to our experience up north. I couldn't afford like a generator or anything like that. And we had a completely off-grid, non-power workaround for everything. We had a way to keep our food cold. We had heat. We had light. We had absolutely everything we needed without any need to tie into solar because, it's like Antarctica up there, so there isn't that much sunlight in the winter. So something really important to look at is maybe not necessarily having your propane stove and generator and that type of thing, or your gasoline generator, because in a long-term power outage, grid down situation, you're not going to be able to replenish your fuel. in a lot of cases. So it's great if you can find something very renewable like solar or wind or water that will work at your homestead, but not all of us are going to have access to that kind of thing. And the most budget-friendly way to prepare is to prepare to live in a way that doesn't require this extraneous power.
Well said.
I got to say, the project that I've been trying to work on this winter is how to, because we live in an old 200-year-old mansion here in Butte, which is great in some aspects. It's got 36-inch walls made out of brick, and I know a storm's not going to come knock it down. But at the same time, with the heat that's in it is just electric and is very unsustainable just on a bill-paying regiment. So we're looking at kerosene heaters. Unfortunately, we rent, so we can't put a fireplace in, which would be, of course, my number one thought there. But I think there's a lot of urban people that are looking for solutions for a rental place or something like that. And unfortunately, I know with my heating situation, we're going to be moving to kerosene heaters. We've tried the propane and whatnot. We're going to try the kerosene heaters this winter and see how that goes. But unfortunately, that is reliant upon having kerosene.
When I lived in a rental in the city, I had a Perfection oil heater. It was an antique one. So they're really cute to look at, and they kind of look like a decorative item. But in a pinch, you can use a lot of different kinds of oil in that, including used cooking oil.
Wow, that's actually something I've actually looked at the Perfection models, and I was under the assumption that they were kerosene, but that's really good to know.
They are, but you can use other types.
And is that only true of the Perfection model, or is that pretty much any kerosene heater?
I don't know. The only one I know about is the Perfection model. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe you can also use diesel fuel, but I'm not 100%. You'd want to check on that.
All right.
I've got a question, if I can, and I'd be interested to know what all three of you think about this. In my view, we have a really an illegitimate criminal that sits in the White House, and I think that the proof would certainly stand behind that comment. I've heard a lot of things, and I think, Tim, you maybe even published something on the Freedom Outpost. What do you think? A two-part question. What do you think the possibilities of a suspended election? Because you've heard that being bannered around about Obama not leaving office, and B, what scenarios could possibly happen if you even believe that's possible to make that happen? You understand what I hope I didn't confuse you with that question. It was a little bit roundabout, but do you guys understand what I mean when I say that?
Yeah. And people were saying that in 2012 also. But I think, at this point, yeah, I think he's an illegitimate criminal. I don't even know, who even really knows that much about him? I've not seen any transcripts of anything that he went to, and obviously the birth certificate was fake. So, who is this guy, right? Manchurian candidate. But I think that, I think they promised Hillary Clinton her chance. So I think probably that's the next globalist we're going to see take the reins as the puppet and try to. I think it's probably going to end up being between her and Jeb Bush. And I think they probably won't suspend the elections because they want to get somebody in there who will do even more damage to the country at this point, since obviously their goal is to tank it. So, but if they were to suspend it, I would say, any of the false flags they like to pick, take your pick, terror attack, Ebola, whatever they want to do, right? Because like you said before, all they have to do now really is have people are so afraid right now. They're so scared of both of the, especially, I guess, ISIS members who are going to infect themselves with Ebola. That's the worst. But people are so afraid right now that they could just use social media to scare enough people and have things. And you don't even have to have any real basis in fact anymore. They've trained people so well on such a steady diet of fear that nothing actually has to even really be going on. They could just fake it all, and it would be enough to shut down things really and declare full-on martial law. We're living in soft martial law as it is. So, that's my opinion anyway.
No, I agree with that. I think something the American people are far and educated on is the fact that we've been living under martial law for 150 years. When Abraham Lincoln did what he did, he basically instituted martial law. That's been going on for This is how these guys have been doing it for a long time. And, it's a sad thing. I was taught in the public school, Abraham Lincoln's supposed to be one of the best presidents. You watch these very clever movies like National Treasure and stuff, which I think are great for, fiction and stuff. But to say that Lincoln was our best president is, they should say he's one of our best tyrants. But indeed, we are under some form of martial law, as evidenced, like was said before, going into airports and a clear violation by a federal agency of searches and seizures. And then that being upheld by courts is just ridiculous. But as far as the elections go and stuff like that, yeah, they probably could do that. That was one of my first thoughts when this whole Ebola thing began to blow up. I'm like, well, we're about a month or two out from midterm elections. And, usually in these kinds of things, the Democrat Party doesn't turn out. And I'm not pushing a right-left paradigm thing. I'm just simply saying they usually don't turn out. And you've got Republicans. But, I'm more of the opinion now in my mind, instead of getting behind somebody, is, you know what, you got to show me you got the goods before I'll vote for you. And I don't see anybody who's got the goods. I hear the guys talk the rhetoric that you want to hear, but they have the power to start impeachments. They have the power to shut down funding. And what have these guys done every time in the House? The supposed good guys, they've caved. They've caved to political pressure so that they live comfortably and they don't have too much to absorb. And I don't necessarily see them cutting off any kind of elections. It could be, but I just don't see it.
They don't have to cut off elections. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's already a story coming out in Fox News about how there was a calibration error in an Illinois county that changed all the votes from Republican to Democrat. Oopsie. I mean, you know what I'm saying? We always have stories coming out of, especially North Carolina, where, whoops, a whole bunch of 132-year-old Democratic women all decided to vote at one time. What? Wow, that's amazing. The longevity there is amazing. I mean, they don't have to do that. That's the saddest part.
I absolutely agree. I got to say, I've been a federal election judge for a couple elections now, and I can tell you that the information we had by the time we locked up had not been transferred, and they'd already called the elections. As I got, but from me getting through the locked door to my car and turning on the radio, the election had already been called. So there was no way that information got counted and put into the system. And I'm sure that's usually, always the case across the state. So, well, guys, we are coming to the end of the show here in about 4 minutes or so. So if we want to just quick finish up, and I want to give you all a chance to please let people know once again where they can see more of your work and follow you guys and keep in touch.
I'll
let the ladies go first.
Well, I work alongside Aaron Dykes. We run TrueStreamMedia.com, and we also have YouTube.com/TrueStreamMedia. We do a lot of video reports. We're up there pretty regularly, except for right now. We've got a couple of days lull because we're working on a big project that we're about to put up there. And then Twitter, we're at TrueStream News because that's all that would fit. So that's us. We can also be found on Facebook too, TrueStream Media.
My website is theorganicprepper.ca, and I'm also a contributing author for the Daily Sheeple.
Me too.
Tim, before we go, I just want to give a shout out to the Daily Sheeple. They have posted our interview with James Wesley Rawls here from a couple of days ago, and it's right there on the front page of the Sheeple. And we just want to once again give a shout out to the Daily Sheeple and thank them. And you too, Tim. I know you post a lot of our stuff, and we appreciate you guys supporting us here at the Liberty Brothers. But please feel free, Tim. Go right ahead and give out your information.
Yeah, I edit, and when I get a chance to, write at freedomoutpost.com and also at sonsoflibertymedia.com. And my Twitter is FPP. That's Frank Paul Tim, Tim, at Twitter there. And, of course, we've got Google Plus and some other things too. But that's me. And you can get these other ladies on my site too, because I carry their stuff too.
You do indeed. You carry a lot of good stuff.
You sure do.
Definitely.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, I
Well, it's
forgot
my
to mention
pleasure. I
that.
appreciate the contribution.
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I appreciate your contributions. I'm sorry.
No, I just meant to say I totally forgot to mention I'm also a contributing writer to the Daily Sheeple, and I love working there. It's pretty awesome. We all work pretty hard over there.
Indeed, and I'm so delighted that it's great that like speaking for anybody, I can probably speak for Jason. It's great for us that we're able to have this radio program and bring some of the people that we really admire, like you guys, and people that have really helped wake us up and does great work. We're just very thankful that we have been provided a medium here to bring great guests like you guys all together here, and we certainly. Really, I know I can speak for Jason. We thank you guys so much for coming on, and we really hope that at all three of you, we can have all three of you back, in the future at some different time, no doubt.
I think we'd actually should try to set up a show where we can talk about the Daily Sheeple website and kind of the history of it, because we have so many people that contribute to it. We ought to do that.
Yeah, perhaps. Why not? We can. I don't want to sound pompous, but we kind of run things, so we can kind of do what we want. So
it is our show.
The Daily Sheeple does what we try very hard to get a huge mix of everything out there in a nonpartisan way, and we try to cover all topics over there that are of any interest to anyone in the alternative media whatsoever. So it's a pretty. Before I worked there, I used to go there to get information. Now I work there, but I still go there to get information. My mom sends me articles from there, even though she's known I've worked there for over a year, and she knows that. And she will send me. Sometimes she sends me my own article and doesn't realize I wrote it. So,
well, I think it would be cool to talk about a little bit about the history, how the site got started, and because I think all of us kind of came up going to the Daily Sheeple, and now we have stuff we put up there, and it's pretty cool. But I think a lot of people would be interested in that story, so maybe we can set that up sometime.
What do you think, Daisy?
That'd be awesome.
All right. Well, we'll try putting that into the works. Anything that we want? Well, we got a couple minutes left, so let me leave it off with this question: do you think we're too far gone? Do you think we can still get our liberty back and get things back to where we think that should be, or is it too late? What do you guys think? Just real quick.
I think that people need to start paying more attention and stop giving up all of their mental energy to this fear-based system that keeps everyone at the bottom level where they're just fighting for basic security needs. I mean, that's what this system tries to do. It tries to instill all this fear so people will just constantly be fighting to stay above water and not paying attention to what's actually going on here. And I think people just need to unplug first and foremost. I mean, unplug from this system. That's how it's going to begin.
I agree completely.
All right, guys. Well, unfortunately, we don't have time to hear the other answers, but I'm sure we'll have all of you on again at some point in the future. Thanks so much for joining us again on the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. We'll be back tomorrow.